And we're live. We did
Hello.
it.
We did it. We're
Good
here.
morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining me, Tia. I
Yes.
always think your name is so cute and amazing too, because we have a Tia in our family, but it's Tia like aunt. But
Yeah.
I always think it's oh my god, that's such a cute name.
I know we always tease because I come from the US originally and we learned Spanish in school, and here in Canada my boys learn French. And so of course learning Spanish at home as a kid, it was always like you'd be Tia Tia if you lived in, Mexico or somewhere and everybody called you Aunt Tia. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, you're right. I'd be Tia Tia."
Tia. I'm sorry. If you ever start if you ever start a band or want to
Yeah.
be some form of a performing artist, you'll have your name set up for you. Something
Exactly.
cute. Anyway, so you're out there in Toronto, up
Yeah.
there, I should say. So
Yeah.
how's the weather up there treating you today? What's
know
it look
what?
like?
The humidity is down. It's beautiful. It's probably like 25 degrees or like 80 degrees if you're in Fahrenheit. It's quite nice. So
Yeah.
it's the humidity drops. We get humid summers.
Yeah.
Um, sort of like New York, pretty humid.
Yeah.
And so it's nice when the humidity goes.
Total We're actually, I think, in the same boat this weekend where it was 92 already with the humidity during the week. And then we were this weekend was it's so
Yeah,
nice.
it's a relief.
Calming it down after after the downpour where it's a random short span. I'm like, what are we in Ireland? What is this? It's like a monsoon and then it the temperature, the humidity evens out. I'm like, okay, just like everything else, right? It's like the
Yeah,
ebb and flow.
it all
Just
evens
wait for it.
out. It's coming.
Anyway, oh my god, so thanks for joining me. Like I said, we're kind of still in this realm of parenting and motherhood and everything. So this is perfect that we got to
Yeah.
connect finally, right?
Yeah.
Um and I just want to, say hello to anybody who's listening or watching. If you don't mind, I'm going to pop over to Facebook and make sure we're going strong in there, and I might even try to pop in and just edit this and tag you,
Yeah.
that way it's going in both of our feeds. But yeah, I just wanted to at least get a little bit about your background and how this all happened for you, right? So I know you have a background in education and you can tell us about that, but how did this evolve into a coaching business around parenting, which of course is so important and so, I'm so thankful that people like you exist because this is not easy.
Yeah.
Especially I feel like for moms, I always say this, it's just we're just told that we're just gonna innately and from within us, just have all of this knowledge and ability to just nurture and all of this, right? And it's okay, no, this is hard. We need tools, we need resources and we need support, which
Yeah.
is amazing, for coaches like me and you, where it's just we're here, we need to do this together,
Yeah.
not in a silo, right? So
Yeah.
tell us how you landed in this space, please do.
Yeah, for sure. And if you want to tag my free Facebook community, Simple Parenting Solutions, there are, I don't know, maybe 12,000 moms in that group right now. So go
Wow.
ahead and
Yeah,
tag that if you want to draw
will
that.
do.
But yeah, so I am Tia Slightham. Yes, I'm a parenting coach, but I'm also a mom. I have two boys. Hudson is 12 and Beckett turned 10 last Wednesday. My baby is double digits.
Whoa.
I know, so scary. But I originally started my journey over 16 years ago, way back when, in a kindergarten classroom. So I have my master's in early childhood education, and then later became certified in positive discipline, and I've been coaching parents for over 12 years now. And I really got to this coaching place from a couple little avenues. And so basically, my teaching led me to believe that if I could get 30 non-speaking English 5-year-olds
Mm.
who came to me, who had never been to school before, who didn't know how to sit crisscross applesauce, who didn't know how to wait in the line, who didn't know how to speak the language, if I could get them to simply and easily give me their focus by saying, ladies and gentlemen, show me your eyes and ears, and they would stop everything and they'd put their hands down and they'd listen to me, and they would follow our boundaries, they would follow our expectations, and they were nurtured, and we were able to bring them to optimal level because we had that structure. And so I
Mhm.
realized when I had my own kids, if I can do it year after year with 30 kids who don't speak English, I can do it with two who do. And so I took so much of what I learned in my teaching experience into my home. And then I was fascinated by all their milestones. And then other parents became fascinated by why my kids were seeming so mature and not fighting with each other and so polite and shaking hands at 2 years old and doing things that they thought seemed unrealistic. Um,
Mhm.
and I said to them, it's just having the tools. It's not that my kids are unicorns or I'm amazing. My kids are amazing, more amazing than me, but that it's the tools. And so then I just became so fascinated in learning and got my certification. And that's when my business just started to evolve and grow. And now it's been over 12 years and I coach parents from everywhere around the world: Dubai, South Africa, Israel, Australia, US. I mean, everywhere parents are inside my program. So it's amazing to be able to connect with parents from around the world.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, congratulations, because that's like, you know, I'm sure it was a big leap to take, but then also it's like this immense payoff where your whole goal of like actually supporting other parents in this is like really happening. So that's amazing.
It is amazing
And
for parents.
yeah. And like I said, and I always try to stress this on this show, like these things that are hard that we all have to come up against, we don't have to do it alone. A lot of times, not only are people, especially parents, especially mothers, I think, hesitant to even voice
Mhm.
their hardships because why? Because we're like, it's like this embedded belief that we're supposed to be able, like, we got this, like, it's from within. We should know before before we even have the children. It's just inside of us that will,
Yeah,
innately be able to manage this. But you're not. And I think one of the biggest realizations for me as a parent was when I finally got the fact that this person, this human that I'm trying to guide is not like, yes, they came from me, but it is not like there's not like this physical tether, like there's not like any real sense of control that I have. They are literally their own person. And so it was like a real game changer for me because I think that it's all about like what belief systems, are given to us, right? So I think that there was a lot of control, like in prior generations, right? A lot of control. It gets sticky, I think. You could just take it from that where it's like, oh, you know, parents are, you'd have to control your kids. Like they have to be manageable, right? And like don't keep them quiet, keep them managed, keep them, yes, safe, but also like out of the crosshairs of everyone else, right? And then there's this like, conforming that comes with that and everything and not really giving them space. So then even if you feel like this inkling, like, let the kids like do their thing, whatever, you're still feeling you have to keep them manageable and like small and quiet and everything. So that's been like a big part of my experience as a parent is really realizing that like you got to kind of let them be them.
yeah,
Um
yeah.
and I think you were touching on that a little bit. Yeah.
There's so much to that because society makes us feel like you're right, like we should have it figured out. Like my parents parented and our grandparents parented, and everybody figured it out. So figure it out. But we live in a completely different world with social media and technology, and it's just a different world. Like we don't send your kids out on their bikes at 6 years old to go around anymore. Like we just have a different way of bringing our kids up. And back then, if they had tools, they'd have used them. They just didn't
Mhm.
have them.
Right.
We just evolved to this. And so parents have to remember that parenting's not intuitive, it's a learned skill. And so I will always say that if you were on stage in front of the entire world and somebody said to you, can you perform heart surgery? And if you couldn't, you would just say no. And you wouldn't be embarrassed. You wouldn't start sweating. You wouldn't feel judged. You would just
Right.
say, no, I haven't been
Yeah.
to medical school. I haven't done my residency. I don't know how to do heart surgery. I have no blame or shame on that. But if somebody says, how come you can't get a handle on your kid in the grocery store? Like, what is your child acting like that for? You're immediately taking it to heart that it's a direct reflection of who you are, that you're to blame. But I say to you, do you have the skills to manage that tantrum? Do you have
Mhm.
the skills to avoid that tantrum? Do you even know if it's a tantrum or is it a meltdown? So here's the thing, don't be embarrassed. Just say to myself or to yourself, I want to learn the skills because I want it to be easier. And if you don't want to learn the skills, that's your prerogative. But if you want to make life easier with kids, it really is skill based.
Yeah, 100%. I always say this too, where it's like, again, we get this in our head where we're supposed to, quote, like, know all of this and have this so perfectly under control and know exactly what to do and what to say. So when we don't, again, everything is about like
Mhm,
stepping when you can't fulfill the expectations,
mhm.
then that's when the shame and the guilt comes in. So you have that piece, but I'm always saying it's like um, this is like I feel like every single time that you are in any situation with your children, whether it's good or bad or, whether it's a tantrum or it's a positive experience or whatever it is the first time you're ever dealing with that. So it's the same thing as you're saying about like if somebody asked you, "Oh, can you do this?" and you're not ready to do it because you didn't have the skills and you're not prepared. Well, it's literally the first time we're doing this. Maybe on your second or third child, obviously it's not the case.
Yeah,
And most people understand that, you're going to learn, but especially like when you are parenting for the first time, it's the first time you're ever experiencing this situation. Give yourself some slack.
yeah.
And I think, obviously, just in general, um, over the last, few years of me, on my own personal development journey of understanding like having a growth mindset. I remember like one of the first time that that I read the book about the growth mindset versus like fixed mindset and being like, "Oh, one of the most important areas that I can apply this to is parenting."
Mhm,
Because again, I'm going to mess up,
mhm.
but I'm going to learn from it. It's an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity to me to step back. It's an opportunity for me to step back and say, "Oh, I didn't exactly handle that the perfect way. Clearly, the outcome wasn't what I intended." So, and I definitely feel like I could have handled it better. So, the next time this happens, I'm going to do better. And what do we need to do? We need to learn and
Mhm.
reach out for the resources that are so available instead of feeling like the pressure
Mhm.
of just parenting perfectly. I mean, I remember when I first became a parent and I like left the corporate world around the same time. I shouldn't say I left because I was kind of forced out and it was like a really, traumatic experience to kind of like shift that identity so quickly. And but I literally took like my perfectionism and anxiety of like that was kind of helping me thrive in the corporate environment into parenting because I felt such pressure to do it perfectly from
Mhm.
the get.
Mhm.
So it was like, I feel like I have to touch on that sometimes because I feel like so many moms suffer from not only postpartum depression, but postpartum anxiety. And
Mhm.
I feel like so much of that comes from this need to do it perfectly and to not mess. I suffer from that too, where I'm like so fearful to like mess up my children,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I feel like that comes up so much.
And then you guys are parents are implementing tools that they think are going to work, and then they don't work, and then they feel
Mm,
defeated, or they try one thing and it works one day and then it doesn't work the next day and they don't know why. And there's all this second guessing, which again brings in floods of doubt, which then you feel guilty about if you can't get it right.
mm,
And so often when I'm on a coaching call with my clients in my program or one-on-one, they come and they're all stressed and, oh, this happened and this happened, and we just break it down and we're like, okay, what went well? And they realize like things are going well. And then at the end of the call, when you have a plan, when you have somebody who's supporting you, when you feel held accountable, everybody's like, oh, I can do this, like I can do this. And so for parents who are two, second, third, fourth time parents who are still struggling and struggling and struggling, that's where you really have to take that step back and say, like, do I want to learn to do this differently?
right,
Because maybe we have another life and we do this again, but for the sake of the conversation, we parent one time. And I don't want to look back with regret. I mean, we all make mistakes. It's not going to be perfect. Even when you have the tools, it's not going to be perfect. But at least you can walk away feeling like, you know what, I bonded with my kids. We have a deep connection. I don't go to bed at night crying every night that I feel bad that I yelled and screamed. We all have moments. We're going to have moments. But overall, I want parents to feel really good about their relationships and really good about the experience they have raising, tiny humans that are going to be big humans.
right, completely. And I think you just hit on such an important concept of that connection
Mhm.
because Like that's the goal, right? Like we talk about not having regrets, right? Like you want to look back and you want to have a deep connection to your children. You want them to know you instead of, and for me, this has been my experience of realizing, I think, again, with all of like the spiritual and personal growth I've been doing, I think one of the most recent realizations I've had as far as slowing down and being able to get on their level again.
Mhm.
And like, it should seem obvious, right? But it wasn't because why? Because I'm trying to live up to this expectation of parenting. So I'm living up here. Like I'm living like um trying to control, trying to be in this like very authoritative state. Not all the time, but like a lot of the time
Mhm.
where you're not able to get down on their level and develop this deep connection with them, so you're like in this state of anxiety as you're parenting, and that creates this boundary between you and your children.
Yeah.
Um, and it's almost right. Like we're almost again, yeah, like we're constantly evolving generation after generation. They didn't have they couldn't use tools they didn't have. I completely agree with that. But it's like this is part of the evolution of being of realizing that kind of like breaking cycles that like didn't work before, that whole, more authoritative way of parenting of like,
Yeah.
oh, you should be seen but not heard or whatever it is. Like
Yeah.
so and I think that's the number one thing, at least for me, where I'm like, "Oh, no, like, that's the most important piece for me is to have that deep connection to my children where they really know me, the heart of me, instead of it being like this facade of like who you needed to like view me as so that you fell in line," if
Yeah.
that makes
No,
sense.
it makes total sense because any behavior we see, positive or negative, is your child's their ultimate goal in that is to connect with you.
Yeah.
So they're trying to meet their needs, and part of that needs in their behavior roadmap is connecting with you. And for as long as we are an authoritarian parent and we're yelling, we're timeout, we're taking things away, you do it because I said so, I'm the adult, you better respect me. If you talk to me like that, you're going to lose this. As long as we're in that position, we're asking our kids to fight back for power. And so, and we, on top of that, we're now becoming opponents, not teammates. And
Mm,
then on top of that, we're teaching them that by acting that way, in that negative way, we're going to get mad. And that's going to give them power and attention, even though it's negative. So now we're mad that they keep repeating the behavior, but we've actually taught them with our parenting tactics to repeat that. And the reason we get stuck in this, the kind of authoritarian approach, is one, that's really how generations
yeah.
before us were parented. You listen. And a lot of times there was one working parent, it was usually the male, and the mom and the kids did what dad said because that was the way of the world. Our world's not that way anymore. We now have, moms and dads and two working parents, and it's not the same. And so that authoritarian parenting, nobody just follows compliantly anymore. That's just not the way that it works. So our kids fight back. So we have to shift our perspective from that place where you say you get stuck trying to manage the kids. We have to shift it from, how can I get them to stop doing this? How can I get them to sleep? How can I get them to stop tantruming? How can I? And we're going to stop and we're going to go back to, why is that behavior happening? Where is it coming from? And what's the root cause? If we can literally put on our detective hats and go to that place, you won't think about how I can force my kids to stop doing things. And
Mm.
instead, you'll be thinking, how with my parenting can I shift this to shift my child's behavior? And you'll realize it all lies on us.
Yeah, it all does. It's completely, I mean, also even coming back to that topic, right? Of like it's on us. So once we can reach out and get like these resources to have tools, also incorporate forms of self-care that are going to like keep us in this state of the even the ability to have that state of connection,
Yeah.
because again, if we're walking around up here on like high anxiety trying to control everything, there's never going to be that opportunity. So I feel like self-care, certain forms of self-care are going to allow you to slow
Yeah.
down. Of course, you can go down the list of things that are going to get you there. But even doing by taking that step, you're like teaching your children how to self-regulate, how to take care of themselves, and that it's okay to do whatever that thing is, whether it's slowing down or taking your time or resting or breathing or whatever it is. Like, you're showing them not
Yeah.
only that it's okay to put energy into that space, but again, that like everything doesn't happen so like naturally and easily. So they don't have to shame themselves for not getting it right the first time or the third time as they grow up too.
Yeah. Like,
So I feel like I love that it's just all connected. Our ability to break this cycle is all connected and really just comes, like you said, it comes back to us.
yeah, we're the role model. Like, if parents will say, my kids are yelling all the time. Well, do you yell? Okay. My kids are talking so rude to each other. Well, do you guys talk rude? And so many times we want to just sweep that under the rug and just say, I don't want to deal with it. It feels icky. I don't even want to go there, or it feels too overwhelming because I don't know where I'm even going to start. And it's so empowering when, like you say, you let your kids know you don't have it figured out. So parents will say to me, like, do I tell my kids I'm joining your program? And I'm like, yeah. How
Mhm.
awesome is it to say, okay, guys, things are not great right now. Like, I don't feel good. I know you don't feel good. I love you more than anything. I don't want this. I want us to be happy. So I'm taking this course and I'm going to need your help because I want to stop yelling. I want to stop doing these things. Your kids are like, oh my gosh, mom
Mhm.
or dad aren't just trying to overpower me. They need my help. Like, how can I be of service? Kids love to be helpers. And so we really do, like you say, become a whole team, and we work on our own ability to respond and not react, as well as helping our kids feel empowered and build their independence and build their responsibility. It's all those pieces of the puzzle, when you work on them together, that bring you to this place where you can feel really proud of the way that you're parenting your kids.
Yeah. Um, a while back, I did your stop yelling challenge. I
Oh,
remember.
amazing.
Um, and so because you're talking about like incorporating your children, sure enough, I told my daughter who's about to turn 6 in like 2 weeks. Um, So this was, like, a few months back, obviously, and she was, like you said, completely, like, on board to helping, and again, like, I mean, yeah, her face kinda, like, lit up when I told her, like, mommy doesn't wanna yell at you. So, like, here are the things that I just learned." We put the Post-its all over, not to give away the details.
Yeah,
We
that's
put the Post-its all over. There's still one like, right here, which
good.
says, "I love my family." Some of them have come down, but a lot of them have stayed up over
Good.
time just because I like looking at them. But, these affirmations or mantras that I was like, that you could look at to remind yourself of something positive in that moment when you're trying to, of course, giving away like how we did this, but, bringing yourself like you had taught us from a 7 or an 8 to a 3 or 2
Yeah,
so that you can respond instead of react. And
yeah.
is it, I have to, I always like to be real, right? Like, is it the easiest thing to do when you're in that moment and you're about to burst out and start yelling and screaming? No, like sometimes it's not going to work. Sometimes it's like, oh, I already yelled. But it's the simple fact that your child is aware that you are trying to alter the way that you react and respond. And even if it's, like the outburst happens and then you have to dial back after that, it doesn't matter because again, of course, I talk about this all the time too. It's the intention that matters. Like you set the intention
Mhm.
and the wheels start turning regardless of if the implementation is executed perfectly. It doesn't matter. You have set the intention to make this change. So if you give yourself that time and that patience, it's gonna happen. And even to this day, this has got to be, it had to be at least 3 or 4 months ago. If I start to, raise my voice, my daughter will say, "Mom, you're yelling. Like, do you think we can bring it down?" And she's still doing it.
So good.
And not to say that like there haven't been a moment or two where I'm like, "No, I don't want to bring it down."
Yeah, I hear
you
you.
know? Where now I'm like, "Okay, why are you telling me that?" But it doesn't even matter because even if I do have a moment like that, I know there's part of the situation in which she is right, like I need to regroup. So, does this, has this brought me to a place of this perfect parenting? No, because perfect parenting doesn't exist. But, I'm not going to get it right every single time. But there has absolutely been a shift. So I thank you for that, because just in a simple like couple day challenge of like gaining this knowledge and these tools from you, it was like, okay, like I see a light somewhere. And I totally yell overall. I mean, I totally yell less now.
That's
Um
good. That's so
giving, and that allows the opportunity for that connection, because like you said, these barriers are going up every
good.
time we do it. And I don't think we have to feel like, again, shame about like, I think I had a conversation with another parenting coach on this topic that really was just like very enlightening, because we do get, I think, into this cycle of like, oh, I've done irreparable damage,
Mhm.
and then the shame comes in, and it's like, I'm just a shit parent. I have worked with moms who will say to me straight up, like, I'm a terrible parent.
Mhm.
It's like, no, because there's no such thing as perfect parenting. There's only opportunity for growth. So we learn and we grow. But I have I had this other, yeah, like this other conversation, and it was just so enlightening for me to have a conversation with an expert that said, "You have the opportunity for repair." Like you go one way and then you come back from it, and it's like, "Okay, good." Like I've always felt like there was that opportunity, but I wanted an expert to tell me it was so.
Yeah, and it's so important to make the mistake and then apologize and come
Yeah.
back from it. You can always come back from it. But if we yell every single day, multiple times a day, and we just say sorry, 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 then our words don't have meaning. Our words have meaning if we're working to grow and make change. And
Yeah.
so often parents who do my challenge or take my yelling workshop or whatever, we will make a lot of changes. With
Yeah.
each tool, you will make a change that trickles into other areas. But we can't just stop yelling if we still haven't made changes to help our kids get ready in the morning, to stop fighting, to stay in their beds at night. If we're only focusing on the yelling, we're still setting ourselves up for failure because we're not including all the pieces. And that's really why it's a system, because we need to involve our kids. We need them to get dressed in the morning and make their beds and go to bed at night and stay in bed and stop asking for 9 drinks of water. And if we don't know how to do that, we end up yelling again, even though we don't want to. And we've worked on our yelling skills because we don't have the other pieces of the puzzle. And that's why, my program, the Parenting with Purpose method, focuses on each piece, because I want parents to have success. Like, I want you to go from here to here and feel like I am like, I could be your parenting coach, Tia. And that's really an empowering moment for parents.
Yes. Oh, it's so true. And it's such a good point too, because this is such a big piece of our lives as parents, is figuring this out, and it trickles into every other area of life because it affects our mental health.
Mhm.
And that's such a beautiful thing when you get to this space. I mean, I've experienced it myself, where I feel like this, that's why I do what I do, right? Where it's like, okay, I have experienced the hardship of having to adjust to motherhood and feeling like I couldn't prioritize myself in ways that I felt very drawn to, which is why now I must coach other moms
Mhm.
on getting them to a space where they feel comfortable doing that.
Mhm.
So it's like that same piece where you're saying, I feel like I could parent, I feel like I could be a parenting coach now. That space of like, oh, I finally got it. I
Yep.
finally got it. It's so important to get our clients to that space, right? And
Yeah.
it's not that life isn't going to come up, the shit isn't going to hit the fan and we're not going to end up in a tailspin again. But ideally, it gets easier
Tools.
and easier to navigate back to your baseline.
Yeah.
We can't, it's not smooth sailing. There's an ebb and flow, of course, to life. It's going to happen. But to have that knowledge and that like baseline for like, okay, I can come back.
Yeah, because so many parents, even with the comeback concept, they feel like, oh gosh, my kids are 7 and 9. Is there no hope? Can I not make a change? Or my kids are 14 and 15. Can I not make a change? And I always say everything is fixable. Everything
Mhm.
is fixable. It doesn't matter. There isn't a right time to start or a wrong time to start. It's, when do you feel like you need to make those changes? And then you do that. I mean, I think about one of my clients, Katie, who came to me with a 3 and 5 year old daughter. in tears. Her
Mm.
husband wasn't supportive. He didn't want her to do the program. She desperately needed help. She yelled all day, every day. She hated
Mhm.
herself. Her daughters were saying that they hate you. You're the worst mom in the world. They were hitting her. They were scratching her. They were having hour-long tantrums, locking herself in her and locking the kids in their rooms, like trying to do whatever they could do. And she hated her life. Like she hated every single day. And then when her husband came home, she hated complaining about her entire day. Like all it was negative, negative, negative,
Mhm.
negative, and she hated it. And she debated and debated and debated because it is an investment. And she could be my coach literally because she is like my whole entire world is different. I now watch my husband who's suffering through things, and I think, well, you could learn the tools too if you want. But it's amazing that there isn't a place of no return. There's always
Yeah.
a place to return.
Yeah. It's so important to know that because I
Yeah,
think we get into a space where we're just like, it is, that it is what it is, mentality, which I hate that phrase. I'm like, I have such an it takes such issue with that.
yeah.
Nothing is what it is. There's
Oh,
always growth or people can't change or whatever it is. No, no, no. It's all growth. It's literally why we're here, if you ask
yeah,
me. Like
yeah.
there's
You
no place
create
that doesn't fit in.
Yeah, you can create how you want your life to live. If you like the misery and the power struggles and the 3-hour bedtimes, then do it. Like, not a problem for me unless it's a problem for you. But if you don't like it, don't stay stuck. Like, that's
Right.
the thing. Like, we get the choice to have our life be however we want it to be. And it's important to just say, I want to make a change. And maybe you join a free challenge like you did. Maybe it's a small step. Maybe it's my free guide on how to connect with your kids in 10 minutes or less a day, which I can share the link to for anybody. Maybe it's one of my nightly virtual workshops. Or maybe you're like, I want to overhaul my family and I want to join your program. There's no right or wrong. It's just take a small step, free or paid, to start
Mhm.
learning some tools. There's tons of opportunity.
Completely. Oh, yeah, we need all of the links, and we'll put it all in the notes, and it's all
Yeah,
good.
sure.
Um, but you touched on something right there where it's like, we didn't get into this yet, but when I know I've heard you talk about, the difference between sort of responding to a situation and really getting to the root of it versus like this going back to what we were saying about that authoritative way of parenting where it's shame based and it's punitive, right? And with the timeouts, right? And everything like that. So I thought we could talk about that for a second
Yeah,
because, it's the same concept of like unraveling this like generational, the
yeah,
difference in how we've evolved because that was the old way. I feel like also the old way, what you were just saying about, staying in that struggle and how your life could be so different if we just grow. But the old way, from a larger perspective, I feel was about staying in that struggle, which is unfortunate. It was almost like the harder my life is, the more successful I am. Or
yeah,
like, like being, almost like wearing that struggle like a badge of honor as instead of it being like, I am going to make an active change. I'm going
yeah,
to make an active and aligned effort to change so that I can live life on my own terms and not just be attached to this cycle,
yeah,
and not do it the way that they did it and they did it and they did it. So again, I think that's again totally connected to okay, example, timeouts. Everybody, that's like
mhm,
been the way, right? But what does it actually do? It creates like this boundary between you and your kids, what you were saying before. So tell us, a little bit about that and like, alternatives, I guess.
yeah. Because so much is it's learning the tools, but it's also understanding why what you're currently doing isn't working and why it's
Mhm,
causing those unwanted behaviors. And so we often come into parenting doing the things that our parents did to us because it's all we know. Or we say we want to be different. I don't want to do that. But because you don't have the tools, you get into a heated moment, you end up doing that anyway and not realizing the repercussions. And so once we start to really put that knowledge in our mind of punishment and discipline are two totally different parenting tactics, we start to realize and have an awareness that makes us want to stop doing what we're doing. So when we look at punishment, punishment is anything that causes your child blame, shame, or pain.
mhm,
So timeouts, yelling, empty threats, grounding, taking things away without notice, Oh God, why do you always have to do that? Any of those kind of comments, the milk spills at the table, and you just like every night, it's always a mess. Like, come on. And then they go away. If you're done, go away. And then they leave and the milk's still there. And we're frustrated because there's a spill, but we haven't done what we need to do, which is discipline, which is to teach, train, and practice, and to guide and to support. And so when we think about the milk spilling, if we were a positive discipline parent, we would say something like, oh gosh, it seems there's an accident. Do you want my help cleaning it up, or would you like to do it on your own? Now, parents will say, but if they were fooling around at the table, well, that means we need to go back a step to what
Mm,
the root cause was of the spill. If it's an accident, great. The thing of the matter is, you make a mess, you clean it up. That's it. That's what we want our kids to know. You make a mess, you pick it up. You drop your snack, you pick it up. We don't want them to feel like, that they're bad people because they accidentally spilled something, because I spill sometimes. But if they're playing at the table, it's not their fault that they're playing at the table. It's our fault they're playing at the table because we haven't set our boundaries, our expectations, and we're using punishment tactics to follow through, which is teaching them to keep acting out at the table. So I
mhm,
want parents to step back and say, when I'm helping my child stop a behavior, am I teaching, guiding, and supporting, or am I giving blame, shame, and pain? Most of the time, it's blame, shame, and pain, not because you want to, not because it feels good, but because you just don't know what else to do.
mm. Exactly. Well, yeah, I mean, I can give an example of my own life, right? Like, I mean, granted, my kids are still pretty small, so I think there's something to be said for age, right? Where I'm trying to give, you try to give them space to like be a little messy and crazy. But my son is 2.5. And yeah, I mean, it is a mess at the table. And he's throwing food around and banging his forks everywhere and tossing this around and playing at the table, like you're saying. So that's what's coming up for me right now. And it's like, um, yeah, but at the same time, I'm thinking, okay, like my tactic is generally you like if you don't stop doing that or you don't finish your food or whatever it is and you stop, playing around and actually eat, if you don't stop, then you don't get dessert. Because that's like, I'm just being, honest about like, and it's funny because we totally did that with my daughter where it was like, totally bribing her to eat her food so that she gets, dessert. 100%. It's bribery. Um, and I guess, yeah, so like the punishment is that you don't get that, right? If you're not um getting it. And I did have a fear that I would be like, okay, well now I've created this situation where the girl thinks that she deserves dessert every night. As soon as she eats her dinner, she gets like her ice cream or her fruit or whatever it might be. And I had concerns, but the truth is that over time with her, I was able to say, okay, well, like you're a little bit older now and like you don't need, like we don't need to have dessert every single night. So sometimes now, honey, like I hate to tell you, but the way that it is now is that you just simply have to eat your food. Done. Like you have to. And if you don't, you don't. I think that a lot of people get like, especially like if we're talking about the dinner table, right? Like there's so much that goes on.
Mhm.
um and of course, like punitive, response for not eating, and we get, oh my god, like to my childhood I got that, right? Like I had an experience where my grandmother hit me for not eating the broccoli, and I
Mhm.
had a loose tooth and my tooth flew across the room because
Mhm.
I got such a whack. But now I can laugh at it, but it's like so much goes on at the dinner table, right?
Yeah.
Um, but just like bringing to attention too, like that element of like, okay, like I thought that I had done irreparable damage by setting up this system of bribery, but at the same time, like being just frank and honest and letting the guard down and letting that authoritative, personality down, getting real with my daughter over time was able to kind of release that and say, okay, but here it is, we're moving on to a new stage and this is it. Like sort of setting that system and that boundary up. Um, of you can't be demanding, dessert just because you ate your food. That's the new boundary. Maybe it wasn't here before, but it's here now, kind of just being super clear about it. But, you still got the 2.5-year-old
Yeah,
doing his
I
thing.
know. And we do often use bribery or rewards to try and force our kids to do the things we want them to do.
Yeah.
We want to shift out of that, because as soon as we do that, we're just opening the door for a power struggle.
Mhm.
So we send the signal that dinner is crap, and if you eat all the crap, you get the dessert.
Mm.
We don't teach them to self manage, when they should be full, when they should not be full, how much do they actually need, how much do they not. We teach them that they can't wait to get to the sweets because the sweets are so amazing, and so they don't have those self management skills and when to like put on the brakes. And then we think that our kids aren't capable because they're two, because they're 1.5. Like, oh, it's just the phase, it's just what they do at the table. But really, we have to set age appropriate boundaries. And so we will try and set boundaries by saying, if you don't do this, if you don't do that. But every time we say if, we're asking for a power struggle, because we're saying, if you don't do what I tell you to do, I get to take something away because I'm the big bad boss.
Mhm.
So instead, a simple trick for parents is to try to stop saying if and instead say when. When you're done your dinner, then we're going to get down and pop our popcorn for the movie. When you're done, getting dressed, then we can go outside.
Mhm.
When your backpack is emptied and ready, then we'll start our game or our show or whatever, and really try and encourage them to cooperate without overpowering. Because as long as you overpower, you're going to ask for like a shit show, struggle, like it's going to happen. And so we also don't want to use rewards, because we will take away any internal intrinsic drive. They will only eat because they want the reward, and the reward will lose its novelty. And when the novelty wears off, parents are out of ammunition. It's like, oh, now what? They said they don't care about losing their device. They don't care about the dessert. Now, how do I make them eat? So it's not about forcing our kids and making our kids. It's learning the skills to set the stage, set the boundaries, so we can teach them how to navigate life, not now in our house only, but as they grow.
Yeah, completely. I mean, and that totally has happened in my house where it's like, okay, what's the thing that's on, that you get if you cooperate, and then all of a sudden, like my daughter will be like, "Well, I don't really care about that anymore."
And you're like, "Shoot, now how am I going to get her to get dressed?"
Okay. And me being me, I'll just laugh. I'm like, "Oh, of course." But of course, then that's where we're at right now and I need like a new system. But yeah, that's the point, right? Is that it's not a sustainable system. So
No.
it's really good to just become
Term,
aware of all this stuff.
short-term Band-Aid results is what
Yeah.
most parents use. So those timeouts and those empty threats and those briberies and rewards, they get us what we want in the moment, but then it repeats and it repeats. And as your kids grow, problems grow. And I have a 12-year-old who weighs more than me. He's taller than me. He wears a size 11 men's shoe. I am not
Wow.
forcing him to do anything.
Right.
So, and he's an amazing boy. He was valedictorian for grade 6 graduation. And not because I tell him, you do your homework or else, but because he goes downstairs and he just wants to do it. And so we start giving rewards with 2-year-olds, and we build that as their way of thought. They build this idea that they have to get something in order to do something. And so we think in the moment we're trying to survive parenting and it's working in the moment, but we
Mm.
have to think about what it's doing long term. Like, what values and role modeling and lessons are we teaching our kids at 2 that will trickle over when they're 12?
Completely. Completely. Um, let's talk for a second about tantrums because we've all got little ones that lose it. And how can we not lose it if they're losing it? It's just like a domino effect,
Mm,
right? I'm thinking of my sister right now because I know I mean, she's come a long way, but I have a niece who's like, notorious for like a screaming fit and everything. And I'm the first one over here that's like, she's 3. She's gonna be 4 in a couple months. Uh, she's 3. Like, give her, it just is it is. I'm guilty of it. It is what it is. She's 3. But, I'm thinking from the perspective of the parents who really struggle with that. It's like, how do we navigate that?
yeah. So we don't have to have days filled with toddler tantrums. We don't have the terrible twos and the three-nagers. Those are just phases and phrases that we make up to help slide under the rug the fact that we're obviously not handling things well. So They don't want to have those screaming fits.
No.
They are doing whatever they can do to communicate to you.
Yeah.
And that's working because you get angry, you get mad, you get frustrated, you don't focus on anybody else. And so we want to look at every behavior as that it's a purpose. It's goal oriented and there's a purpose. And so when the tantrum is happening, the tantrum is just a symptom to a greater issue. So what's the real issue? Where is it coming from? Why is it happening? Like, you have to do that work. And so once you really understand all these things, you're proactively doing them without even realizing it. So you're avoiding those tantrums. But in the heat of the moment, if a tantrum happens, then we want to be sure that we are responding in the appropriate way. And so we have to know that every outburst we see isn't always a tantrum. So tantrums occur. So the symptoms, let's talk about the symptoms. The symptoms all look the same. So
Mhm.
for a tantrum and a meltdown and any outburst you see, they're crying, they're screaming, maybe they're throwing things, they're stomping their feet, they're slamming themselves on the floor, they're making you drag them, like whatever's happening, it looks the same. And so we interchangeably say, oh, my child's melting down, or my child's having a tantrum. And then we try and stop the behavior. We want them to quiet down and we want to stop the behavior. We're not doing the work that needs to be done to help the behavior stop from coming back. So in the moment, you see the symptoms. That's where it gets tricky because they're the same. But the root cause of a tantrum and a meltdown differ. So the tantrum is anything that your child's really pissed about. They don't like the outcome. You told them no to the third cookie. You have to leave the park. They need to turn off their TV show. You won't let them hold your phone. You've said enough. Whatever it is that makes them mad in the moment, they're going to tantrum to try and push your boundaries to get what they want. But here's the trick. They don't actually want you to give in, because
Mhm.
every time you give in and you give them what you want, you've made their life extra difficult. Kids are born with two predetermined jobs: to please you and push boundaries until boundaries are found. So as they tantrum and you give in because you're like, stop the noise, I don't care, fine, have the third cookie, you have done a couple things. You have totally lacked a boundary. So now they have to push next time. They're going to push next time harder, stronger, and longer. And three, we've taught them that when you push harder, stronger, and longer, you get what you want. So
Mhm.
now we're in this tantrum cycle. And so when we look at the root cause of it being them upset about a situation, part of the reason the tantrums are occurring long term is because we're not handling it with the right tools. When we look at meltdowns, I like parents to think about it as just physical and emotional overwhelm. So if there's a pitcher of water and it's full, and you just keep filling it, and it's overflowing, this is how your child feels. And this can occur from a child who's overtired. If your kids are not sleeping well, you have to start with sleep. If your child's over hungry, if they have any excessive worry or anxiety, transitions, a change in the family, we really need to work to help support them. So when your child's having a meltdown, you're in like support mode. You're putting on like your hero cape and you're like, how can I support you? But you have to know if it's a tantrum
Mhm.
or a meltdown. And you won't know unless you're checking all the boxes on their roadmap, which we do inside my program. When it comes to a tantrum in the moment, if you don't have all the tools and you're like, but what do I do right now, Tia? What do I do? I want you to use a 3-step tantrum strategy. So I call it VCS: validate, choice, space. So in the moment, you're going to validate. I'm really sorry you wanted another cookie. I can see how upset you are. Help your child feel seen, heard, and understood. And then you're going to give them a choice. We can have more cookies tomorrow, after lunch, or after dinner. You pick. Or you can say, would you like a hug, or do you want to be on your own? You can give a choice that you feel is going to resonate with your child. Simple, simple choice, age appropriate language. And then you're going to give space. If they're like, no, I don't want cookies tomorrow, and they're like, okay, then you're going to say, you know what, I'm happy to help you when you're ready. And you're going to give them some space. The emotion is fine. The tantrum is fine. Welcome the tantrum.
Mhm.
Let them know that they can feel how they want to feel, but parent in a way that helps stop that extreme outburst so they can feel good about their feelings. Whereas when we keep giving in, we actually make them feel worse about their feelings.
Yes. Oh my god. I can't, I love it when things align like this because I kind of feel like that's in a nutshell what I've kind of naturally been doing in the like I've kind of I think, step 1 was to realize like how to regulate myself and like focus on that for a while. And then the slowing down, which I mentioned before, allowing for like connection.
Yep.
And now this is exactly where I'm at right now is allowing that those emotions to happen because I have the ability to not react so so immediately, right? Um and yeah, and then thinking about giving, especially my 2-year-old, right? Like some choices instead of being like angry that he's screaming and yelling because he doesn't get to have any more goldfish
Mhm.
and giving him and threatening him to put him in his room if he doesn't stop yelling, which again, it's like, again, you have that concept of like, two if you have two parents in the household, what's one doing, what's the other one doing? My husband will be the first one to be like, he's going in his room. And I'm like, I really want to figure out other ways to do this. Like, I don't, it's like, I'm not going to tell him what to do. Obviously, if I'm not here, he's going to do what he's going to do. But, like I said, in recent months, or in recent weeks, it's been like, I know there's a better way to do this.
Mm.
And I'll try, I think that the question piece of it is like, it empowers them a little bit because it puts them in a place of power where it's like, okay, well, here's what we can do. And so you empower them to be like, oh, okay, like I feel like I am in control here to some extent. I see a complete difference as soon as I shift that onto my son, as soon as I put it into that perspective. And then of course, yeah, the space piece of it too, which is hard, admittedly, if the screaming is still happening, right? And it hasn't stopped, like we haven't like put the top on it, but at the same time, we have to be aware of that voice in our head from past generations and old patterns where it's like you have to stop the screaming, you have to put a cork in it. Not necessarily. I know it sucks to sit there and have to hear it for maybe like another minute or whatever. It's probably going to only happen, right? For another minute, 2 minutes, right? Eventually it's going to have to stop at some point. But giving the space for them to like just like let that at least in my situation. It might not always that question and that empowerment it might do the trick, but it might not be the end of the tantrum, in which case it's like, hey, I've given you all the options. Like I've laid out exactly what we can do here. I'm sorry that you're still upset. Let me know when you're ready to go for a walk or
Yeah,
whatever it
and
is.
that walking away does a couple of things. It gives them some space, and sometimes as humans, we need space. We don't want
Mhm.
to be surrounded by somebody. And two, we're not an audience to the unwanted behavior. And if you're an audience trying to be the fixer, oh, come see mommy. No, no, we'll make it better. Well, what about this? Well, what about? It's exhausting for you. It's exhausting for them. But it gives them an audience and tells them, wow, if I keep screaming, mom sticks around, dad sticks around. This is going to give me lots of power and attention for my
Mhm.
emotional needs. And now we're asking them to tantrum more.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I see that happening already in my household. It's such a flip when we transition this. And even just thinking about my daughter, like there was a certain point, I'm learning a lot more this second time around. I almost feel bad sometimes that I didn't have the tools I did with her. But they're so wise. Like it's not just, oh, my kids this and that. Like the kids are so wise. They already know, like
Mhm.
I feel like what happens is we get, that those feelings and those that arc of emotion is squashed so much in prior ways of parenting in the child that you lose your connection to what your body is telling you, like like the signals that your body is telling you that you need to communicate a need.
Mhm.
Um that but initially before that happens, like us as humans, we're wise. Like we know that there's something to be addressed that we really need to communicate in some way, and it's just that whether or not we have the tools yet to communicate it
Yeah,
productively, and the child generally doesn't so far. They're still learning.
you have to
But
teach
at a
and train and
yeah,
practice that. Yeah.
totally. And at a certain point, I just remember with my daughter, and she may very well have learned this from watching something or from reading a really good book or something like that. But she started telling us, I need some time. I need some time. I'm going to go in my room. I need some time to myself. And
That's
then I followed her lead because then when she would freak out, I would ask her, do you need some time? Do you need some space? Or do you want to take some deep breaths? Or do you want to go into your room for a few minutes and like chill out and then come back and talk about this? And she would respond positively. So it's
yeah.
like, going with it too, like, see, once we can, right? I think with the piece has to happen first where we can learn how to regulate our own stuff, because technically we're having a tantrum too
Oh,
in those moments.
for sure. Yeah,
When we can't regulate and you can't even see and hear your child
yeah,
fully as far as what they're trying at least to express that they need, because you're in a friggin' tantrum too,
yep,
reacting to their tantrum.
yep,
That has to happen first. So, of course, like,
yeah.
bringing it back to the topic of self-care every time, because it all comes back,
It's
right?
so true. Yeah, and if you're not parenting a way that feels good, you're not taking care of yourself.
Yes.
And you're not. If you're yelling every day and you don't like it, you're not taking care of yourself. So when you don't take care of yourself, you don't show up as your best self. So now you're not parenting the best of your ability. You're not having the relationships to the best of your ability. And so if something doesn't feel good to you, then that's where we make changes. I always say it's just like parents who, want to lose some weight, or they want to up their exercise and they want to have more energy. We have to take steps to do that. And parenting's the exact same way. And when you say that kids are so wise, like even thinking about your 2-year-old son at the table, he's wise and capable to actually sit and have a whole meal just like the 6-year-old, to maybe not for the same length of time,
Mm,
but just like the, to sit and know that food stays on the tray and that we don't play. But what he's begging you to do is say, hey, mom, can you show me what your boundaries are? Can you teach them to me? I want to know how to please you, and I don't know how. So at the table,
mm,
if I do this, I get power and attention, but it doesn't feel great. And so we then can say, how can I teach, train, and practice my mealtime boundaries? How can I teach, train, and practice my bedtime boundaries so that our kids can be successful? Because even 2-year-olds are capable of so much. Clothes in the hamper, helping to tear lettuce for your salad at dinner, emptying out the plastics from the bottom of the dishwasher and putting them into a Tupperware drawer. Like, yes, they're only 2, and I have an older one and a younger one. And sometimes we go to the older one all the time because it's faster and easier, or we just do it. But just know that your kids are capable, they are wise, and those unwanted behaviors are just them saying, hey, help me fix this.
yeah. 100%. I feel like the first thing that I always asked both my kids to do, like, for their first chore, was just throwing things in the garbage, right? Like, I don't care if it's something that's right next to my foot on the floor. I'm like, "Ollie, come over here and pick this up and put it in the garbage."
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
just like, like, get you started on, like, let me ask you to help me with
Yeah.
anything. But it's so true. We get into this, you know, it's a whole nother conversation, right? We get into this state of, like, martyrdom where, like, we have to do everything ourselves, and it's like, we
Yeah.
don't need to live there. Who, like you were just saying, it was so beautifully stated, which I'll go back and grab the quote, but it's like, yeah, like, we're doing a disservice to ourselves if we're just deciding to parent in this way that you clearly know you're not happy with, and, like, your whole day is so consumed by parenting in so many cases. Like, it's such a massive piece that if we don't focus on that and do it for ourselves, then we're really doing ourselves, like, a massive disservice, I think, you
Yeah,
know?
and it doesn't go away. Like we sometimes say, "Oh, well, I'll get my life back when my kids go away to university, or my kids go away to college, and I'm finally going to be able to live again." Or, "Oh, thank God my kids are in bed. Thank God they're in bed.
Mm,
I'm dreading the morning, but thank God they're in bed."
yeah.
And if we live like that day in and day out, well, one, it sucks. But two, once they do grow up, it doesn't get better. Like,
Mm-mm.
you don't get to change it. And so now you have to say to yourself, am I going to have a long-term relationship with my kids and maybe possible grandkids? And do I feel like it's not something that ends? And I think sometimes we think like our kids are going to grow out of a phase, or they're going to grow up and then things are just magically going to be fixed. And it's not the case. Like, what you do today with your kids affects their relationships, how they treat people, how they treat their partner, their friendships, how they treat their kids, your grandkids. So what you do today is like a lifelong gift that you're giving your kids when you learn the skills to parent in a really positive way.
Yeah. And I think that connection that we were talking about, like you're saying, that taking that into the rest of their relationships, being able to decipher when somebody is setting a boundary for them,
Mhm.
being able to watch you set boundaries so that they feel comfortable setting their own boundaries in their own relationships when they grow up. I mean, there's literally no greater gift that we can give them.
Yeah, being seen, heard, and understood, and knowing that your feelings are okay and your parents aren't going to punish you for those, but they're going to teach you lessons, even if they're hard lessons to learn. Sometimes people think positive parenting means letting your kids just get away with everything. No, there are boundaries, there are expectations, there's follow through, but you do it in a way that if your best friend or your boss were watching you, you'd be cool with it. Like I always say, litmus test parents, how you just responded or reacted. Are you cool if your boss is standing in the room or your best friend or somebody you really care about? Would you have acted the exact same way? And if the answer is no, then we're probably not doing things that feel good. And that's where we
Mhm.
want to make a change.
Yeah, it's our little trigger to know that there would be something to change about your approach, right?
Yep.
Ugh,
I
so
know.
good.
So good. So many good things.
So many, I mean, and there's these conversations are always like, you could go so much deeper, right? But
Oh,
it's like, we could probably talk for hours, but this has like been amazing. I really appreciate all this guidance, all these nuggets of knowledge are so, it's one of the biggest pieces. Again, of course my focus is so much on moms and their prioritizing their wellness, and if we are, once again, like if this is such a massive part of your every single day, it's not just like, oh, similarly, like if you're working full time and you're going into a job every day, ideally, I'm always encouraging parents or, anyone to start to vocalize what they need and set boundaries in their workplace, right?
yep.
I come from, like I said, a space, a corporate atmosphere where that flexibility and that space for your own mental health and personal growth was not, and that there's still a long way to go in a lot of industries with that, not having that. So I'm always talking about that piece, right? But it's the same thing because you have this separate full-time job of parenting that you should figure out how to do it on your own terms in a way that feels really good for you. And so it is literally a form of self-care to focus on ways to to help you through this very difficult job,
Yeah,
It's so
for sure.
important.
Yeah, for sure. And I know sometimes parents are like, what is the right next step? Is this right for me? Is this not right for me? Is this going to work for me? Is this not going to work for me? And so I do offer multiple times monthly a free like informative call. It's like a Zoom discovery chat, 10 parents or less, and we talk about the program, your challenges, what's right for you. Is it a smaller step? Is it the program? It's not a pressure moment. It's just hey, I need some information on what's the right next step for me. And so I always encourage parents to take one of those calls and learn. And then if it's not right, then walk away. And if it is right, then great, you're on your next step. But that's just tiaslightham.com/connect. And so it's a great way for us just to connect and to get you on a good next step for you.
Perfect. Yes, that was going to be my next question, to tell us where we could find you. This has been amazing. Perfect.
Yeah, yeah. So, and parents can find me on Instagram at Tia Parenting Coach. I have a free Facebook community where I do lots of challenges, like Samantha was saying, simple parenting solutions. My website, tiaslightham.com. And I started a new venture in January. And yes, I am on TikTok. My boys tease me for that, but that is at Parenting Coach. So there's lots of videos, and they're all tips and tricks and little tools that you can take and try. So definitely start learning and check it out.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been great. I'm
Yeah,
going to let you go enjoy the rest, what remains of the weekend and
yeah,
the good weather. But again, hopefully we can do this again because there's so much to talk about.
anytime. Anytime.
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Perfect. I'm going to end our broadcast, and anybody who's watching, if you are watching this live or if you're replaying this, if you have any comments, feel free to still send them over because we can always like communicate with Tia and get her into the self-care with Sam group even for some questions and to connect everybody. And if you love what you're listening to, please go ahead and follow us on YouTube, Self-Care is My Job channel, or on your podcast platform. So this is going to be uploaded in just maybe a day. I always give myself at least 24 to 48 hours to get it there. But be on the podcast, Spotify, Apple, Google, all the places. Thank you again, Tia.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon.